Hello everyone. Hello everyone. This is Chase Pounds. In today's video, I'm going to be discussing whether or not the third-class passengers of the Titanic were prevented from getting up on deck, or simply lost their way, trying to reach their way to the boat deck. Now, what brought me to this subject is, well, actually to begin with, today's the 111th anniversary of the Titanic disaster, with this being April the 14th. And I thought it was fitting to discuss, which the Titanic is my favorite subject. I've done a couple of videos on the Titanic, from the films and other topics. I felt fitting to discuss a particular subject that interests me is the issue about the subject of the third class passengers, or whether they were prevented, or I should say the class myth of the third class passengers being prevented. Now, I had some prior knowledge of this. Well, I have always wondered this, going all the way back to the 100th centennial, which was in 2012. At the time, I was in 8th grade. And I remember following the anniversary of the Titanic disaster. The anniversary of the Titanic, the bicentennial of the Titanic disaster. I particularly searched the internet, looking at different articles of whether the third class passengers were prevented from getting up on deck, and they came up with different conclusions. Many of them said they weren't prevented. That the fact that they just mostly lost their way, and that many of them of the third class passengers did not speak English. They couldn't understand the orders they were given to get up on deck by the stewards, and that contributed to why many of the third class passengers did not make it to the lifeboats, and many of them were many of Titanic's victims. This subject is particularly interesting me because in a way this was kind of my precursor to me studying and analyzing class status, social status, as well as ethnicity and even race, and I guess one of the things as I got older particularly interested me with the subject of the Titanic is that it deals with elements of classism, as well as sexism, in a way, as well as analyzing the women and children first policy, and the fact that many of the first class women and children were saved versus third class women and children. Many men had fewer chance. Many of the men on the Titanic had fewer chance of survival that night. And other aspects of the social status that Actually, in many statistics, they say that many of the first class men were saved versus third class children, and I always thought that was interesting. That was the case with it being the women and children, which interesting case, the breakdown against class, and this was another aspect of classism is how the care of many of the when in the rescue ship the Mackie Bennett recovered many of Titanic victims. All it was a different care of how the bodies were to be disposed of and how they would be treated, how they would be recovered and taken back to land. Was that many of the first class, passengers were given were given were given coffins and caskets, nice grand caskets, while the second class and I think the third class, well, I think the second class and third class were all put in the ice and canvas bags, while those bodies that were considered identifiable were to be buried at sea, whether it was crew or steerage passengers. And that element as well kind of interests me as well. And again, of the class, social status associated with the Titanic. And I get out. And I also, again, as I said, particularly fascinated with the whether the third class passengers were prevented or not, and there was no evidence really substantiating that they were prevented. Though many films that have been made, and it's been said that is exaggerated in many of the newspaper accounts at the time following the disaster, as well as depicted in film. In almost every film I've seen on the Titanic has traditionally depicted the mistreatment of steerage passengers being prevented from getting on deck from both the made-for-TV and the theatrical version of A Night to Remember, up to the highly successful, widely known 1997 James Cameron film version with Leonardo DiCaprio and Kate Winslet, which, by the way, is the 25th anniversary of the release of the film. And in many cases, it always depict them being prevented by angry, prejudiced stewards, sometimes at gunpoint. In the case of the James Cameron version, as well as gates that are locked that are also prevented from reaching the boat deck. In some cases, they will bust them down, and stewards would come by and threatening to arrest them and charge them for destroying private property, or I should say destroying the company's White Star Line property, as it was said in the film. But any of this has been really considered to be true. It is again, many accounts there aren't many accounts to substantiate the claims, other than there aren't many but since there weren't that many third class passengers that survived, many of them did not account make any accounts of them being prevented, denied the sinking. But other than the only account that exists that fuel that the only account that was mentioned that kind of gave fuel to this myth that the third class passengers were prevented was by the third class one of Titanic's few third class survivors, Daniel Buckley, uh, who um who mentions how as they're being prepared to as they're being instructed to go on deck, Daniel Buckley actually makes accounts by saying two sailors came along telling them to put on get dressed and put on life jackets unless you want to get drowned. And he even makes accounts by saying he went back to get his life jacket and the water started coming up the stairwell, the third class stairwell. And then it was later on that he went, I guess, in the third class general room, third class saloon, and he talks about how they try to keep us down there. They try to keep us down there. He said that mentions how another third class passenger started to work his way out of the third class saloon, and they said they shoved him back down into the third class area. He even makes a comment by saying, if I could get my hands on those sails, I would throw them overboard. Other than Daniel Buckley's account, as I said, there aren't many accounts suggesting that the third class passengers were prevented. And as few of them even make reference, many of the other surviving third class passengers make conflicting accounts that they were helped up on deck. Such as such one case is of a third class lady named, I think her name was Minnie Cowards, who had I think 2 children, and she couldn't speak she could speak English, but she said she couldn't find her way up on deck because there were several doors that were locked, and sailor actually not only helped her make her way on deck, she also took her down to her cabin to get her life jacket. I think she may not have an extra life jacket, but the seaman offered her a life jacket, and he said, if you make it, pray for me. Please pray for me. And she would survive. While there was other accounts of such crew members trying to help this. Other crew members, notable crew members that helped the third class passengers, such as Stuart Hart, who led a group of third class passengers up on deck. And up on deck, but there aren't many accounts that they were prevented, and though it's always again been speculated that many of them couldn't find a way up to the upper decks because of that they were so far down below the ship. And again, the fact that many of many of the European, even the fact that many of the majority of third class passengers could barely speak English, and, and the gates for that matter. Many people say that the gates, how they're depicting the movies, didn't exist. How they way that the gates are depicted in the film as excessively being around as extensively as well, how the film depicts the gates being excessively all around the ship is inaccurate, and the fact that the gates weren't really high, weren't barricades that were way up high up to the ceiling, but were gates that were more waist high, and that they were housed in where that these gates would be found would be out on the promenade deck, the forward wheel deck, up that led to the stairs up to the first and second class promenade deck, and the ship, and that was what some of the passengers accounted for, the gates that prevented them, that were locked, that couldn't get them on deck, that where they weren't able to get to the upper decks, the lifeboats, and that's always been suggested, and the White Star Line during the inquiries always insisted that there was no form of discrimination was intended for the third class passengers. Yet, even though it's been said they weren't guilty of discrimination, not to say that it could still have happened, and there may have been prejudice among the third class passengers, especially at the time. Many third class passengers at the time weren't considered many European immigrants at the time weren't seen as was seen more as an inferior race. Just like today we think of, which was even the case back then, that blacks, Asians, and Hispanic are the inferior race. And at the time, a lot of European immigrants were seen as inferior, non-white, compared, especially in the Anglo-white American Anglo-Saxon view, as being inferior. Of course, Titanic's passengers consisted of many Irish immigrants, given the fact that many of the steerage passengers came from Queenstown, Ireland, and which Queenstown, Ireland, by the way, is where off the coast of Queenstown Island is where the wreck of the Lusitania lies, and it's also with Irish connections that the Titanic was built in Belfast, Ireland, which you had a couple of which you had some of the people who built the Titanic who actually sailed aboard the Titanic. They were known as the Guarantee Group. They I think were 5 of the workers who built the Titanic, and unfortunately none of them survived the actual sinking. And at that time, Irish particularly were seen as, between that time during the mid 1800s and kind of up to this period, the Irish were seen as well as an inferior race, though later on they will eventually become accepted as part of the fabric of American society. But during the mid 1800s, during the turn of the century, Irish were seen as an inferior race and were discriminated against, as well as stereotyped. There's a lot of stereotype tropes associated with the Irish, such as just like our stereotypes would have been. That's like with black stereotypes like coon and Sambo and Mammy. There was Patty, and Patty was a demeaning stereotype often depicted in cartoon illustrations, which was seen as grotesque and as grotesque as beast-like and almost childlike in a way, and was thought to be corrupt for society, as it encouraged I guess violence, drunkenness, I guess lust over sexual crazes, and that was one of the stereotypes and many of the new arriving Irish immigrants actually even looked down not only by white Anglo-Saxon, but some of the old already born Irish Americans that resisted going back to the Revolutionary War, and they kind of distinguished themselves from the new arriving Irish immigrants. They were known as, they called themselves Scotch Irish because a lot of them were said to be from Scotland, but moved to Ireland before they immigrated to the United States. And a lot of them were, again, as I said, considered the inferior race. Now, I kind of mentioned this before in previous videos. I did another video on Irish Americans, of a documentary I watched on the Irish Americans. I watch every St. Patrick's. I started watching last year's St. Patrick's Day and this year's St. Patrick's Day, and I kind of picked up some more things that I didn't really catch the first time. And the reason for why many of the Irish came to America was because, again, the potato famine. But that's one of the myths about the Irish, why the Irish immigrants came to America was because of the potato famine, but really it's because of also political issues overseas. And that's why many came to the United States to find better opportunities for better life and better work opportunities. Though discrimination would continue among the Irish, though over time, about near the end of, I guess, towards the outbreak of World War I, the Irish, about that time period, they would gain acceptance as one of the acceptance in society as the melting pot, what's called the melting pot effect, where you come to the United States and you eventually adapt and blend in with American society, and people who once ridicule you eventually begin to accept you as the dominant figure in society. And that was the case with many of the Irish and the later immigrants that came after the Irish. Many Irish actually immigrants kind of became the model, the model ethnic group for the future, for the next ethnic races to come to the United States, ethnic groups to come to the United States, as they were also involved in the immigration process of newly arrived immigrants. Some of them documented the new arriving immigrants. Yet the irony about the Irish is, they were discriminated against. In some cases, they were even enslaved. There have been sources saying that they were enslaved as well. Many of the Irish also adopted a lot of the prejudices prejudice norms of the United States among of the idea of white supremacy in the inferiority of other minority races such as blacks. And a lot of Irish that came to the United States, um, some of them settled down south and became plantation owners and owning slaves. Yet they were people that had once been enslaved themselves. And a lot of them supported the Confederacy. As I mentioned this before my video, that there was in New York in 1863 there was the Civil War draft riots. And many of the Irish particularly took part. Irish Democrats took part in the massacre, burning up the all black neighborhoods, destroying homes and churches and orphanages. And that's not very known about. And I just think it's ironic that Irish adopted some of their own prejudices as well, and believing the concept of white supremacy. Yet they were considered an inferior race. And but anyway, many of the as I said, many of the third-class passengers on the Titanic were of Irish descent. Were Irish, and many of them were the ones that would die. Probably one of the many victims of the Titanic's third-class victims to die. But the fact is that many of the third-class passengers, again, did not have much of a chance. Some did, I guess. Some few who did make it their way on deck did make it to the last lifeboats that were remaining before the ship went down. But majority of the third-class passengers did not have a chance, and many of them died in disaster. Compared to many of the first class, second class women and children who had, as well as the first and second class men, had a chance to get a spot, had a chance to be saved. And this particularly, as I said, it fascinated me because I think that was a precursor for me studying and analyzing race and ethnicity and statistics and demographics. And though I kind of think that personally, I think that it may have happened that they were prevented, but it's not known for sure. But many say that they lost their way on deck because there was no one. Many of the crew members were busy and weren't able to help the third-class passengers, and many of them were so below deck they didn't have time to make their way up to the lifeboats. And it was carelessness on the crewmen for not having the responsibility, for not taking responsibility and helping to assist the third-class passengers. And if they were assisted and help and guidance to the upper decks, they probably would account for more of the survival rate, attribute to more of the survival rate, less, I guess, fewer loss of life, perhaps. And this marks the again this is all I have to say for this from the subject. This again marks the 111th anniversary of the Titanic disaster. This is another video by Chase Pounds. Stay tuned for our next video.